before I forget.
Recording started.
You already slept. Okay, good. So today I want to talk about modifiers and specifically this issue of meaning. One person in the questions mentioned this idea of what do you do when you can't split a sentence correction question? And I'm going to assume everybody here knows what the heck I'm talking about. Give me a frowny face if you don't even know what I mean when I say split. And the frowny faces are to be found. Yeah, give me a smiley if you do know. The faces are kind of over here under the participant window. Okay, cool. So it looks like we're all speaking the same language. That's good. And just like a general tool stuff, this is the sort of chat window down here. If you don't see that, you can always write in the chat window. Feel free to keep everything public so that everyone can see your questions. There's a smiley face and such. I will change the polling to A through E, but we'll talk about that in a second when we're actually doing questions. Yeah, somebody asked me, what do you do when you can't split a sentence correction question? And that seemed like a worthy topic for discussion because to some extent there's no such thing as a splitless sentence correction question, and that's why I called it the myth. But what there isn't is a very, very visual split. And to some extent that is what we mean by a split. So, you know, I'm being a little bit creative here with the term myth because very often there isn't an easy visual split, but there is always a conceptual split. And so we're going to just work on how you sort of find that more difficult split when there isn't an easy visual one. So some basics, I just stole these slides from Ron, but they are worth knowing. In terms of submitting to the Thursdays with Ron/Tommy experience, some things not to do. General questions, there were a couple of these, you know, I suck at math, or which is way too general, obviously, but even I suck at algebra can be a little bit difficult to answer in a helpful way. So try to be as specific as possible. That being said, individual questions are too specific. We can always glance at them if there are a lot of them and see if there are common themes, but we won't be answering individual questions. That's what the forums are for. If you haven't been to our forums or any of the forums online, pretty much every GMAT question that has ever existed in any dimension is listed on some forum, often multiple times with a huge discussion and numerous instructors weighing in. So it's really worth searching there first. Finally, don't submit any personal issues. You know, we get a lot of people saying, I'm not good at the GMAT yet and I only have 3 weeks. What do I do? That's not something that I can sort of helpfully answer on here. So what we want to see is, you know, intermediate depth. I don't like median questions. Well, that's specific enough that, you know, there are a lot of them out there, and it ties into this more general idea. Also, no OG questions. Don't forget, we can't talk about OG problems on here. They are copyrighted. We are not allowed to publish them in any sort of public way. So that's why we can't talk about those. Right, so yeah, don't do this. Here's some examples of this. Oh, and this is Ron's thing here, but I suppose he's had some bad luck with it, so I'll repeat it. Don't be rude. Answer my question. You must answer my question now. I guess some people do that. Yeah, this is all ready said. One other thing, Ron has been doing these for a very, very long time. And that means there are many, many of them on the website under the Thursdays with Ron. I think there's something like 50 of them, he said, which means many, many subjects have already been covered. Now, I realize that it's more fun to be in a class that is new and to ask your questions live. I do appreciate that. And, you know, over the 50, there have been some sort of duplications in ideas. But overall, try not to ask a question that has already had a whole session devoted to it, particularly if it's recent. So you can see here this actually only goes up to October 21st, 2010, so this is a year old, this picture right here. But you know, if you want to ask about standard deviation, that's already up there, and you really should watch that video first. And then if you watch it, you still have questions, you can always come back. So that's that. Those are the intros. These are the answer buttons right here. We are going to be doing some questions today. Please, when you pull in, click A, B, C, D, or E. Do not type the letters down here. Could everybody press one of those buttons right now? so I know that you're all on top of it. Any letter, just pick your favorite letter. The idea is just we don't want anybody typing down here, because if you type down here, everybody can see it, and if you put it in here, everybody cannot see it. It's hidden. And oftentimes when people see a lot of A or B or C, they put it in themselves, so it really skews the data. Okay, cool. So that's how that will work, and you only need to click it once, and it will register. Don't worry. Okay, so let's talk about this no split thing. This subject may take our whole hour and a half. Maybe it'll just take an hour, and if it does, then I'll open up the floor to just general questions. But it might take all of our time too. We'll just see. So no split situation. So what is it that's happening when you look at a question and everything just kind of looks different? And so you don't quite know what to do with it. Well, there are a couple things that are happening. One of them we won't talk about too much today, but I just wanted to throw this out there. Oftentimes there is a split, and by this I actually mean a visual split. I'll even add that in there. But you're just not seeing it, particularly when the sentence is very long or the underlined portion is very long, and when it's not at the beginning or the end of the sentence, which are real sort of key nodes for people to kind of start looking. Oftentimes students will miss those splits. So the lesson here in general is don't become totally obsessed with the beginning and the end. And you know if you do this, but I get students all the time, I'm going to add this in here. Don't be obsessed with the differences at beginning and end. Now, this isn't to say, somebody just raised their hand. I assume, Pal, is this because of some kind of technical issue? Are you having trouble hearing? You can type into the chat window. Usually we only have people raise their hands if they want to come on the microphone. So I can give up the mic if you want, Pal, and come on and ask. I can teach you how to come on the mic if need be. There's a microphone down in the bottom left of the corner, bottom left corner of the screen. Hopefully you can all see it. That microphone will be grayed out when I'm talking, but if I give it up, if I let go of it like a walkie-talkie. Pal, I don't know if you can hear me. Everyone, I'm going to type really quickly to Pal. Give me 2 seconds here. Yes, I know. So one of the joys of this platform is I can actually see people's connection speeds. So there is some kind of connection problem there on Pal's end. Sorry about that, Pal, but I will keep teaching and hopefully that will clarify. So first rule of sentence correction. It's fine to start by looking at the beginning of your answer choices and the ends of your answer choices because there are a lot of useful splits there. But students will often start with those splits no matter what, even though there's actually an easier split, but it's internal and it's a little harder to find. So don't be afraid to keep looking for splits. Now here's the main issue I want to talk about today. And I call it modifiers masquerading as meaning. And what I mean by that is a lot of students will become obsessed with this idea of meaning as if meaning is not in any way grammatical. In other words, as if it's subjective. Hopefully we all know the meaning of that word subjective. It means it sort of looks different to everyone, like beauty is subjective. And meaning is a real issue on the GMAT, but it is not subjective. It is utterly objective. And to that extent, I like to think of it as a grammatical issue. I like to think of it as every bit as grammatical as any other kind of issue, whether it's subject-verb agreement or parallelism. It's still a grammatical issue. And it tends to revolve around modifiers. Modifiers change the meanings of sentences. And we'll look at some examples of that on the next page. But I put a little question here, and there isn't a single correct answer, so I'm not asking you guys to answer this question. But the point I want to make here is when we look at this first, and hopefully you've enjoyed all of my hilarity here. But when you look at this at first, I think the way that most of my students would look at this is they would look up here and they'd say, oh man, there's no split, right? Because take a look. We've got this very, very different opening Everybody, please don't move things. I can lock the slides here if need be. Hold on one second here. I think this will keep people from moving things around. Let me know if you can't see anything, if there's a problem, but don't move boxes because it moves them for everyone. So the way that most people would look at this, right, is they'd say, oh, look, there's no split. Everything looks totally different, and then everything over here is the same. But there's no sort of little grammatical thing you can go on. And my point is this. Even though that is technically true, that you don't have something like, I don't know, run, run, runs, runs, run, right? When you see that visually, it's such an easy split. Or if you see go, gone, had gone, have gone, gone, right? Like, okay, well, that's going to be a verb tense split, and these are very obvious. That being said, there's still a split here in that 3 of these answer choices do something that we don't love, and 3 of them don't. Does anyone know, or sorry, 2 of them don't. Does anyone know a mistake in a few of these, something that we don't love in terms of clarity and modifiers? And you can just type it into the chat window when you see it. Sentence does not begin with because. The sentence doesn't have to begin with because, actually, Jonathan. And this is actually the point I was trying to make before. This desire to just kind of fixate on the first word. Like, oh, there's this change on the first word, so I'm going to grab onto that. That's not actually going to be a problem spot more than, I don't know, 30, 40% of the time at most. So no, you know, we can start with on account of, or due to, or though. All of these are legitimate ways to start. Ambiguous precedence. Okay, what are you saying there, Ari? We're getting closer. What do you mean there? So we've got this pronoun issue. I also like to see it as a modifier issue, Ari, because technically, whatever it is, we really want it to come right after this comma, okay? Now, you're absolutely right that we don't love using pronouns before we know what they're going to refer to. But if Tommy came right after this comma, we would be modifying Tommy, and that's what we would be sort of discussing here. So that's kind of my point here, is that A does it, B does it, C does it. Now, whether you want to see this as a pronoun issue or a modifier issue, I'm actually fine with either one. It's problematic both on both counts. But my point is this. You might not see it as a split per se because everything looks so different up front. Everything looks so different. And yet there is actually a very straightforward 3-2 split. Okay, and that's what I want us to sort of be focused in on. There is a split here. It's just not visual. Okay, so in other words, there is no such thing as a no split situation, and that's why I kind of called it a myth. It might not be visual, but it's going to be there. Some other basic stuff today, since we're going to mostly be talking about modifiers. Modifier issues are often long, so whenever you see the whole sentence underlined, that's a good sign that you're dealing with modifier issues. Also, anytime you feel that there's some kind of subjective meaning issue, that is because of modifiers. And we're going to look at some examples here. I'm sorry, you guys. Pal is still having troubles. He wrote to me privately. I like to get everyone feeling good if I can. Okay, so let's talk about what I mean when I say that modifiers change meaning, and that's what they functionally do. First, I went to the store, right? What is the modifier in this sentence? First, awesome, first. Does anyone know what it's modifying? Nice, you guys are good at this. Absolutely, it's an adverbial modifier, and it's modifying went. And the meaning, very straightforward. Before I did something else, right, I went to the store. What if I said this? I went to the store first. What's the modifier? I know these are boring questions, but you know, it's the fun. It's rapid fire. Wow, this got hard. No, it's a much easier question than you're all making it out to be, thankfully. Well, I cannot be a modifier, you guys. I is the subject, right? I is just the subject. It's actually still first. Nothing changed. Only the placement of first changed. But actually, nothing in this sentence has changed. Nothing at all. There is no difference between saying first I went to the store and I went to the store first. Now, there might be a slight implication. Well, okay, the one maybe tiny difference. This isn't a grammatical difference at all. You could argue that here when you say first I went to the store, second you could do something totally different. So for example, second I napped. Whereas in this one, the implication is I went to the store first and then I went somewhere else second. Maybe there's a little bit of a hint of that, but again, it would be nothing that you would build a GMAT question around. Okay, so that's not a big deal. I'm going to take those away. That's how unimportant they are to me. What I want to compare to is this. What is the modifier here? It is still first. It is still first, right? Nothing has changed. What is first modifying? Yeah, now it's modifying store. It's an adjectival modifier at this point, right? I went to the first store. And the meaning here has now changed, right? Choosing among stores, I went with the first one. And this is what happens when you move modifiers around, right? Now, none of these sentences are particularly unclear. But we can look at some other examples here. Let me just show you some examples. Also, you guys, a student asked me privately, please feel free to always write your questions publicly, just otherwise it looks like I'm answering ghostly questions. Somebody asked if we're going to mostly talk about verbal today, and yes, we are. However, I always like to throw this out there very quickly, okay? Sentence correction is the single most important part of the GMAT, okay? It is the most important part. If you're not clear on this, verbal is weighted more heavily than quant on your test. This surprises a lot of people. People don't want it to work that way, but it seems to be true. Verbal is weighted more highly. You get a higher score on the overall test if your verbal is higher than if your quant is higher. You look different in the marketplace because a lot of people have high quant scores and far fewer have high verbal scores. And sentence correction is the easiest place to improve your verbal. So in terms of where you want to be spending time, this is often the most effective place to spend time. Students often become obsessed with quant. And the reason why, and I really mean this, is that it's easier. And even if you're not a math person, I, for example, am not a math person, but quant is just easier. There are rules, and you learn them, and you get the right answer. So, you know, when I do Thursdays with Ron, I've filled it a few times. I think I've done verbal every time. And it's only because I think that it's understudied by people, and it's really worth the time investment. So that's the answer to the question. But of course, if you only came here for quant, I will totally understand if you want to call it a day. There might be a little time at the end to talk generally, and then maybe you can bring something up. But yes, my plan was to go verbal. So let's look here at these examples. As you can see, we have the chart with a medical degree can be read by a physician. What are the modifiers in this sentence? Can anybody type them into the chat window? The modifiers in this sentence. Cool, we're still missing one. We're still missing one. No, chart is a noun. Chart is the subject. So a few people picked out medical on its own. Now, technically, medical on its own, yes, is an adjective. It's a modifier. So that's true. Then a lot of people picked up on with a medical degree. That's a prepositional phrase, and it's modifying. Oops, sorry. Sorry, you guys. I meant this one. Though obviously the same holds below. And it modifies chart. But no one has picked up on by a physician. By a physician, also a modifier. Prepositional phrases are all modifiers. And it's modifying read. It's similar to first. It's an adverbial modifier. Okay. The point is that this is a problematic modifier. Obviously, the chart can't have a medical degree. What about this sentence, you guys? Everybody give me a, let's see, give me A if you like it and an E if you don't. For sentence number 2. Okay, looks like we have a pretty even split. Everybody want to pull in? The letters are up here. They're blue. So let's see. We've got, yeah, pretty even split. Look at that. Half and half for A and E. So we have 2 modifiers yet again. A person with a medical degree. Well, with a medical degree is modifying person. And this says, can read the chart by a physician. This does not actually make a whole lot of sense. Now, you could say it could read a chart by a physician, but the chart by a physician, what would that mean exactly? The chart was written by a physician? Do you all see what I mean? It could be like the chart written by the physician, maybe. Or filled out by the physician, but it doesn't actually make sense. So this is actually a problem modifier, okay? It's not missing an action verb. It's not missing any kind of verb. No, I'm not sure how an action verb would be related here, but it's not missing a verb. It's just read the chart by a physician. It's like saying I can read the book by a novelist, right? I can read the book by an author. What do you mean by an author? Like the book is specifically, but by an author is any author, right? How can there be a specific book by any author, right? Oh, I see. You mean by it can mean beside. Can read the chart by a physician. No, I don't think they would do that on here, RA, but I do know what you mean. You're right. That's kind of a weird pseudo-read of it. But either way, it's wrong, so that's good to know. It's also ambiguous. This example, though, is great. The chart can be read by a physician with a medical degree, right? By a physician modifying read, it's who can read it, and with a medical degree is modifying physician, which is perfect, right? So these are just some examples of things to be on the lookout for with these modifiers. So the no-split methodology. So when you see a sentence and it has no split that you can grab onto, the first step is to read the original sentence in its entirety, okay? Now, this is always your first step, by the way. But what you're going to be on the lookout for very specifically, with an awareness that there's no great visual split, is you're going to look for these categories that you can explore, and it's not going to be visual, but you can still explore them. Okay, in other words, all the categories we know, subject-verb agreement, pronouns, modifiers, and everything else. Now, in particular, you're going to want to focus on things that are wrong, right? If you notice something in the original sentence that's wrong, that's super helpful. But of course, A is going to be right 20% of the time. So, you might read through answer choice A and nothing jumps out at you. This, number 3, is also very important because when there's no split, there are very often modifiers. Now, I don't want to say all the time, but I would be willing to come down 80–90% of the time. When there's no easy visual split anywhere, there are probably modifiers in that sentence. So start off by looking at initial modifiers, and for what it's worth, Ron did a whole Thursdays with Ron on this subject. You can look back into the archive. And then finally look for all of the other signals of modifiers. Commas, which are always either modifiers or parallelism. Relative pronouns, which, that, who, whom. Prepositional phrases, and participles. Now, if some of these terms are totally unknown to you, that's okay, but you do want to know them. Modifiers are an incredibly important category. Some of the questions we're going to be doing today are drawn from our Quest for 750 Sentence Correction Slam class, just a couple. And that whole class is about modifiers. That's how important modifiers are. So you really don't want to ignore this category. Finally, if all else fails, and you've looked at A and you don't see anything wrong, just move on to B and read the whole thing. Now, the overall Manhattan GMAT sentence correction methodology says you don't want to be reading all 5 answer choices horizontally. It's too time consuming, particularly if it's a long, no-split, modifier-based question. That being said, remember that either A or B is wrong every single time. So if you read through A and it just looks perfect and beautiful, nothing jumps out at you, you've got nothing to go on in terms of splits, well, move on to B, because something needs to be wrong in A or B. And hopefully by finding that, you're going to know. Dumb question, do you mean there's a 20% chance that answer is A, not that 20% of right answer is A? Actually, both, Care, both. The GMAT normalizes, so when you take your test, it wants to give you about an even number of A's, B's, C's, D's, and E's. So actually the answer to your question would be yes to both. A will be right about 20% of the time on your whole test. Yeah, what that means, Charnella et al., is on a normal test, as bizarre as it is, if you were going to guess, you would just want to guess randomly. It would never matter. So sometimes people say, oh, guess, C, 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 C. But it would never actually matter because you have a 1 in 5 chance every time. It really doesn't matter. That being said, on the GMAT, you are actually better off going with the same answer choice every time if you had to guess randomly because it normalizes to 20% of each. So it actually forces some order on it. So yeah, again, that actually should never matter because you shouldn't be guessing out of 5 almost ever on the GMAT, almost ever, whether on quant or verbal. So that should never even come up as an issue. Okay, let's look at some questions. This one actually has a secret split. I'm just going to tell you that, but let's take a minute 15 on it, and then everybody pull in. All right, everyone, that is time. Please poll in right away. I will lock the polling when need be. So you have 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, and time. So here's the thing. I'm going to be very, Janetta, please don't type your answer into the chat window. We're going to click the buttons up here. But I have grayed them out now because I want to hold everybody to time. And the reason why I want to hold you to time, it's not just because I'm a jerk, though of course I am a jerk. It is because sentence correction, when done correctly, usually will not take much longer than that, even when the sentence is quite long. Now, if I feel differently on certain questions, maybe I'll give you a little extra. Please, guys, don't touch the board. It moves it for everyone. So just let me know if you have a problem seeing something, and I will try to adjust it from my end. If I feel like a sentence really does require more, I might give you a little bit more, but I want to hold you to this time because this time forces you to do these questions with method instead of with your ear. If you take a long time, you can often sort of effort them out by reading them aloud in your head and kind of feeling what feels good. And I really want us to avoid doing that. So my first question here is, did anyone see the split? Did anyone see the split? is versus are. Very good. That is absolutely right. Is versus are. So it comes here, here, here. So I only wanted to do one question like this. It's the only one of these we will do today, in which there is actually a split. But the point is, what's going on at the beginning, it's not super helpful. It's not that there's nothing there. It's just not super helpful. And then there's almost nothing at the end. So we have this is are. And of course, it's a subject-verb agreement issue, right? And I gave that away down here. Just wanted to make this friendly to start out with. So we're going to have to go looking for the subject. Hopefully we all know these rules by now. And what is the subject in A? The powerful effects. Very good. The powerful effects of random reinforcement. So effects is, of course, plural. So we have to use we have to use are. So A is wrong. Okay, what is the subject in B? And you'll notice that it changes, right? It's not quite the same. Well, I guess it is and it isn't. What is the subject in B? So believe it or not, none of this stuff is the subject. Now, I know there's often a desire to pick whatever comes before the verb and say like, oh, well, it has to be. But there are a couple exceptions to this rule. The first exception is when you have what's called an inverted subject sentence structure. The problem here is actually the sentence is so bad it doesn't even really have a subject. But I do want you to be aware, if I say something like, what is the subject of this sentence? Hopefully you can all see it down here, the one with France in it. Yeah, it's rivers, right, or many rivers. Even though there comes before the are, it's rivers. So that's called an inverted sentence structure. In this case, the subject is actually powerful effects, is the way they're trying to write it. The powerful effects are something. None of this stuff is the subject, but this is more complicated than this, and it gets into what we're really talking about today, namely modifiers. There's a modifier problem here. Does anybody know what it is? You can raise your hand if you want to come on the mic and explain it. Take a second to see if you can see a modifier problem. Or yeah, you can type into the chat window too if you think you see it there. Nobody's really sure. So I recommend you all watch Ron's session on initial modifiers, but take a look at how this starts. No longer limited to casino patrons, test subjects, and stock market investors as evidenced by the multi-million-dollar collectible card game industry, comma. Something needs to come after this, right? Yeah, a noun. Very good, JC. We need to get a noun after this comma because this is a modifier. Something in the universe is no longer limited to casino patrons, test subjects, and stock market investors, right? And we need to get what it is right after that comma. This is a rule of modifiers, okay? So we actually have more of a modifier issue here than a subject-verb issue. Technically, effects is still the subject, but the modifier is broken, okay? So we've already gotten rid of A, we've gotten rid of B, and for what it's worth, E makes the same mistake as A, right? We have effects and is. So now we come down to C and D. We had a fair amount of both in the room, almost an even split, in fact. Does anyone see a problem with one of these two? Clearly our subject-verb agreement is still okay in both. Powerful effects are, powerful effects are. So it's not subject-verb agreement anymore. What is it? I'll give you a hint. It's something else we have talked about today. In fact, we just talked about it in the last 30 seconds. Maybe that'll help. We have a modifier error. JC, where is that? What do you mean? She doesn't have a noun. I would disagree with that because it says a recent study, and that is a noun, right? The problem is more indeed doesn't have a noun after the comma. A recent study indicates that the powerful effects of random reinforcement is evidence. Sorry, indeed doesn't have a noun after the comma. JC, do you want to come on the mic and tell me what you mean? I'm not quite sure what you mean. Don't have a mic. I don't believe it. They don't build computers without microphones anymore. Are you in class on an iPad? Wait, that has a mic too. All right, fine. You don't want to talk on the mic. No worries. Okay, so let's see, right? Let's look at our modifiers. In A, we have what? What is the first modifier in, C? What is the first modifier in C? Yeah, this is our modifier as evidenced by the multi-million-dollar collectible card game industry. Okay, what is it modifying in C? What is that modifying in C? And for some reason, oh, there we go, cool. Yeah, it's modifying a recent study, right? A recent study. Now, what is it modifying in D? Powerful effects of random reinforcement, right? Powerful effects of random reinforcement. So let me, I want to make sure we sort of get this color-coded here because it's important. So I'll put that in purple, and I will put this in purple. So here's the million-dollar question, right, in terms of meaning. And I'll write it down here if there's room. Is it the study or the powerful effects of random reinforcement that are evidenced by the multi-million-dollar collectible card game industry? What do you guys think? I spelled evidence wrong, but hopefully you know what I meant. What do you think it is, you guys? Just think in terms of meaning, right? Because we've got modifiers and meaning here. Yeah, well, we seem to have mostly agreement. And it's absolutely the effects, because the study itself is actually indicating the effects. So that's not evidence of, the card game industry doesn't show that evidence in itself. What it is that the powerful effects of random reinforcement have been evidenced by the multi-million-dollar collectible card game industry. Now, I don't know if any of you out there ever played, Magic the Gathering or Pokemon, but the idea here is that people want to open packs of cards and get random stuff. The idea that you could randomly win something big, that is what is evidenced by how successful this industry has been. And that's why the answer is D. So here's the important thing to me on this question, okay? The subject-verb agreement is important. It gets rid of A and E, and that's pretty helpful. But B, C, and D also have a split. There's also an issue here, and the issue is modifiers. There is a modifier split in this sentence, and I want you guys to get as good at recognizing modifier splits as you are at recognizing subject-verb agreement splits. Now, I know that's not easy. Subject-verb agreement splits, it just are. It should be so obvious. But I want you to notice that this phrase, as evidenced by the million-dollar collectible card game industry, keeps moving around. In A, it's next to reinforcement, right? In B, it's next to investors. In C, it's here. In D, it's there. It keeps moving around, and I want you to notice that because it is fundamental. It is meaning-based, but it is also grammatical. It is wrong to say this sentence modifying something that is totally illogical. Okay? So before I leave this one behind, are there any questions? Does it make sense kind of what we're doing here? All right, I'm going to take your silence as enthusiastic assent. So if it wasn't clear, by the way, the answer was indeed the D, which makes the random reinforcement the modify E. All right, everyone, let's do this one. This is a tough question, so I'll give you a few extra seconds. Praveen et al., please do not type your answers into the chat window. Please use the letters right here. The letters up here. Do you see the letters, Praveen? They're in blue. And they're up here. You can just click one. Do not type your answer in the chat window. Everyone will see it. And I don't want to bias people one way or the other, whether you get it right or wrong. Praveen, do you see those blue letters? Could you click one? Maybe Praveen does not have audio and is just doing this visually. Okay, anywho. All right, so let's look at the polling results here. We have a lot of love for B, and then a little bit for A, C, D, and E. And what you're going to notice here right away is the splitlessness, right? I mean, though viewed from a distance, those Saturn's main rings may appear. Saturn's main rings, when viewed from a distance, though composed, everything is different. And there's almost nowhere you can look anywhere in these answer choices that is any help at all, right? Man, that is the worst. And this is why this methodology is so important, because the first thought I want you to have is there is going to be a form of modifier issue, and there is going to be a meaning issue, okay? And those two things are going to be wrapped up in each other, okay? So I want to throw this to the floor first. Can anybody give me a reason they crossed off anything? So just as a starting point, you can type it in the chat window. Does anyone see a grammatical issue anywhere? Because there's so much difference here, but maybe we can find something. So you can just type in the chat window, or if you want to raise your hand, you can use that sort of picture of a hand with a green arrow, and then you can come on the mic if you'd rather explain it. A has a meaning issue, says Kier. Okay, so we've got a meaning issue. Satish is typing something. Though viewed from a distance is wrong. Though viewed from a distance, Saturn's main rings. Appear smooth seems better than appear to be smooth. Okay, cool. So I want to start. Let's talk about both of these. These are good. So Satish, I want to start with yours. And if you don't mind my using you for this, this is good. This is the kind of split that people grab onto when they're not sure where something more fundamental is, okay? And so what I want to actually get you to do, and it's not just you, believe me, Satisha, a lot of people in the room are going to be in the same boat, but what I want to get you to do is not use splits like that ever. Or if you're going to be harsh about it, that cannot be your first issue. In other words, you have to find something more fundamental. Remember that a sentence is never going to have only tiny, weird style issues. There's going to be at least some grammar, and then maybe on a difficult question, one sort of subtle issue like that. He appears friendly, he appears to be friendly. As far as I know, Satish, both of those are actually fine anyway, but it's not something we want to grab onto first, okay? So now somebody mentioned a modifier issue here. And Ari, you're talking about the stuff at the beginning when viewed but closer viewing. What do you mean by that? Do you want to come on the mic and explain what you mean by that? Somebody else grab the mic. Obby700 grab the mic. If you have something you want to say, Obby, that's fine, but you weren't saying anything. Okay, so let's talk about modifiers. So Mo, you're bringing this up, and Kier brought up this though viewed from a distance. That's also wrong, and you're absolutely right. Though viewed from a distance, that's not what we mean. What we mean is when viewed from a distance, right? And these are both modifiers. And I want to talk about this modifier here, when viewed up close. Can anyone tell me what when viewed up close is modifying? In A, when viewed up close. It is modifying R composed. So you need to be a little bit careful when does not modify a noun. It's about time. Anything that's about time, I'll do a little side note on this. Anything that's about time needs to be an adverbial modifier. So if I say like, by Monday, you will be fired. By Monday, what is it modifying? You guys, what is by Monday modifying? Yeah, technically it's modifying will be or will be fired, but it's not modifying you. You does not exist in time. This is an answer to the question, when will the firing occur? It's about the firing, it's not about the you, okay? And anything about the time is the same way. When you get home, I will be there. When you get home is actually modifying, you know, will be or will be there, because that kind of thing. Now here's the issue that a lot of people are saying, right? This is about when. If I say, when you look close, it is on fire. Let's just make it very simple. What is the problem with this sentence? Sorry, I fixed the pronoun issue. And I'll compare it to this. Here's like another sentence. We have two sentences here, and one of these makes a mistake. And it's not a pronoun issue. The ant is a man. I'm going to call him him. And I'll change this to closely, which is what it should say. It's a modifier issue. Anyone know the problem? And Mo, I thought this was what you were commenting on if you want to weigh in. You and house. I don't see a problem there, Sam. You can go into more detail. Maybe I'm wrong. No, it's not a pronoun issue. It can only be house. You is a person, so you can't say it for a person. It's not a pronoun issue. Mo. So Mo is picking this up, you guys. And this is what we're talking about today, right? We're talking about meaning. And it's why you always need to be able to take a step back from grammar on these more difficult questions and not get caught up in the minutiae. The problem with this sentence is it's saying the house isn't on fire unless you look closely at it. Do you all see what that means? When you look closely at the house, it is on fire. That doesn't make any sense. It's always on fire, right? If it's on fire, it's on fire. It's not that it's on fire when you look closely at it. Now look at this example. The point here is the ant doesn't run away unless you look closely at him. That makes sense because, you know, the ant is going to notice if you stare at it, then it's going to run away. That's something that makes sense. Everybody give me a smiley face if you can recognize the difference here in meaning. And you can frown if you don't quite recognize it. Okay, so I see a little bit of frowning. I'll try one more time. Why not, right? If I say, when you look closely at the house, it is on fire. The implication there is that it's only on fire when you look closely at it. That's what it means when you say the word when. Like if I say, when I'm tired, I sleep or something. The idea is that it's on fire only when you look closely at it. But if a house is on fire, it's always on fire. It's not on fire when you look closely at it. It's just on fire, whether you look closely at it or not. Whereas in the second example, which I will box to keep them very separate, in the second example, the point is that the looking closely actually has the effect of making the ant run away. And maybe I'll add that in there. Looking closely does not create the fire, whereas here, looking closely does cause the ant to run away, right? So now let's go back here. Let's look at what A says. Is it true that they are composed of thousands of separate icy ringlets when viewed up close? Everybody give me a smiley or a frowny if you think that can be true, that they are composed of thousands of ringlets when viewed up close. Cool, so a lot of people aren't voting, but everyone who's voting is voting correctly. This does not make sense. They're always composed of thousands of separate icy ringlets, right? They're not only composed of it when they're viewed up close. What else makes the same mistake? Does B make the same mistake? Yeah, it does, right? They are, in fact, composed of thousands of separate icy ringlets when viewed up close. No, no, no. They're composed of thousands of separate icy ringlets always, right? So let me put this down here. When viewed up close, should not modify are composed, because it implies that the viewing is what does that, right? Now let's look at C. What is, let's look at both. What is when viewed from a distance modifying? So remember, you can't actually modify nouns with when, right? We've already talked about this. So it can't be rings. I know that's what it's touching, but touching only matters when you're modifying a noun. It's actually appear. Appear is a verb, right? And hold on, you guys. I'm color coding this, which takes a little bit of time, but I think it'll be helpful for everyone in the long run. So just so you know, the blue is the modifier, and the pink is the modifier. Okay? So in this case, we have when viewed from a distance is our modifier, and it's modifying appear. Does that make sense? Does it make sense that when they're viewed from a distance, they appear a certain way? Yeah, this does make sense. Do you see the difference? The difference is it that when you look at them, they are this way, or is it that when you look at them, they appear this way? Oh, that's what it is, right? When you look at them from way far away, they look a certain way. It's not that they are a certain way, because your looking at them can't affect how they actually are. But your looking at them in a certain way can affect how they appear, right? Okay, so that one's okay. What about this second modifier, when viewed up close? What's that modifying? Thanks, Satish. Oh no, it's are composed again, right? We don't want that. So the first one was okay, but not the second one. Okay, let's go on to D. What is our first modifier modifying? May appear. We already worked out that we're okay with that. Is there a second modifier like there was in C? There's actually not. So I know that we're trying to grab on to something just because that's how the structure has been up till now. But there just isn't. They've gotten rid of the second modifier. They just say closer viewing reveals them to be composed. Closer viewing is now our subject, right? And the verb is reveal. So there's no modifier here. But what you'll notice is there's also no problem, right? Because we don't have a misplaced modifier, so there's no issue there. And then finally, in the last one, we have composed of icy ringlets if viewed up close. Once again, they are not composed if they are viewed up close. They are always composed, so we have the same problem there, right? And then the second one, when they are viewed from a distance, that one is actually okay because it's modifying may appear, which would be okay. So D is the only one that doesn't break this meaning modifier issue. So that's the whole question, which is cool, right? Because it's a really hard one, and I don't want to underplay this, you guys. This is a tough question, so don't feel bad about missing it. But what you'll notice is this one issue is what's wrong with all four of them, which is nice. Somebody has moved the box. Please don't move the box. I'm sorry if my square is off people's screens. It's the problems with what we're using here, this Illuminate platform that can appear differently on certain people's computers. So I do apologize for that if that's what's happening to you. Let me know and I'll try to fix it. So give me smiley faces if that's okay. If it's not, I would like to hear specific questions, not just a frowny. I'm happy to answer specific questions though. All right. Cool. Let's look at some more. I don't know why that's in purple. Sorry, you guys. Let me just. Well, here I'll start the timer. You can all work it out. Are people not seeing the question? Give me a frowny face if you're not seeing the question. Man, Illuminate is being so wacky today. Sorry, you guys. Let me try doing a little motion. Maybe that'll help. I'll reset the timer. Sorry about that. All right, everyone, that's time. Pull on in. You can take a few extra seconds. We're doing hard ones today, I know. I'm also giving us a little less time just so we can get through more. All right, so looking at the polling results, you know, a lot of love for everything. D is a little bit the winner, but C has one fewer vote, E one fewer than that, A one fewer than that. So a little bit of everything here. And that's okay. That's okay. So our methodology you're going to remember for when there's no good split to jump onto, and you'll notice once again way too many differences to kind of grab a visual split, is we're going to read through A and look for problems. And we're lucky today because we're going to see some. Anybody have any problems in the original sentence in A? Either categories or specifically? JC, a parallelism issue. Nice. All right, where's the parallelism issue? Anybody see it? Harmless is not parallel to eaten. Yeah, so, well, you got to be careful. You're right there's a parallelism issue here, but it's actually a pretty subtle one. Does anyone know what kind of word eaten is? Nice, it's a participle. So it functions like an adjective, which is what harmless is. But you're still absolutely right that this enormous participial phrase, which is modifying, right, is not really parallel to harmless. Right? These don't match up because this is a giant participial phrase and this is an adjective. How can tomato be now harmless and once thought to be non-harmless? I'm not sure what you mean, Abby. That seems pretty logical. It means they used to think it was dangerous and now we know it's not. Or do you mean like it should be like we know it's harmless instead of just it is harmless? Because that's a very good point. It should say something like, and now we know it to be harmless just like we thought. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So that's a little illogical as well. You'll notice that both of these problems will be fixed by the correct answer. So we've got a parallelism issue. Which other answer choices make the same error? Yeah, B does it. Anything else? Anything else, you guys? I think there is. I think C does it. The tomato is harmless and now eaten in large quantities around the world. That's the same kind of annoying list form, right? And let's look at E. Even though it is harmless and now eaten in large quantities around the world, oh my God! They all do it. They all do it except the correct answer. Now take a look at the difference in D. Eaten in large quantities around the world and known to be harmless. What you'll find in both of these is they're both, actually I want to make them both green to be clear here. Yes, Mo Yang, we should absolutely always look for parallelism when we see and check it, particularly when it's when things are changing around the and very visually. So you'll see like we have eaten in large quantities around the world, known to be harmless. This fixes both of the issues. Both that harmless is just really short and eaten in large quantities around the world is really long, and the GMAT really doesn't like that. I'll write that down here. I think it's interesting. Doesn't like to parallel a really wordy modifier, now eaten in large quantities around the world, and a really concise modifier, harmless. This is just an aesthetic issue. So this isn't the same thing that, who was it who was saying? Somebody mentioned, oh, Avi, your issue is also relevant, which is that we really want it to be known to be harmless as opposed to just being harmless, right? So D actually fixes both problems. I mean, we've already answered this question, but just for the heck of it, does anyone see any modifier issues anywhere in here? Just because we're talking about modifiers a lot. Ah, yes, Mo, there we go. We have a modifier, right? Including belladonna. This is a participial modifier, and we really don't use participial modifiers with commas to modify nouns. It doesn't really make any sense. The tomato is a member of the generally toxic nightshade family, including belladonna. It's just dangling there, right? It's just floating. Guys, Charnella, please don't move things. I can see people moving things. Please do not move things on the board. Let me know if there's a problem seeing it, and I will try to move things. Okay, cool. So this including belladonna is definitely problematic, which includes belladonna, of course, much better because it modifies nightshade family. And what I want you to notice here, I'm really glad you all noticed parallelism. That is rad. But I don't want you to ignore these modifiers. That's what I'm here about today, right? As soon as you see that you have including belladonna here, which includes belladonna here, and then the last sentence moves the including belladonna to the end, right? It's moving around. This means you have modifier issues, and you want to deal with it. And so that would be another reason to get rid of all of these in purple. Let me type this in here just so it's clear. Including belladonna is a dangling modifier, right? Okay, cool. You guys are really good at that one. The text you are writing is on top of the question. Is it for everyone? Gotcha. Wow, that is just annoying. Sorry, you guys. It's not for me, but it clearly is for all of you. I can try to shrink this up, and maybe that'll help. Yeah. So JC, that's better. Okay. Cool. Cool. That was something. Sorry about that, you guys. Oh, illuminate. Okay. Let's try this one. I don't know what's going on, you guys. That was already very far down the page. It's really weird how they do that. Apologies. We'll put, not this full time, but we'll do another 40 seconds. All right, just figured we'd go on full time. Man, this is frustrating. Sorry. Okay, cool. So Ampton's in, and yeah, we have a fair amount of agreement here, so we won't take too long here. But can somebody just tell me the fundamental meaning issue here? Because this does revolve around a sort of meaning thing, and it's fairly easy to say, I hope. Yeah, so Tish, that's a good way to put it, JC, as well, Ari. Who's getting tutored here, right? And so, you know, once again, right, we look at this beginning. We see the teachers, the tutoring teachers, students. There's no great split to grab onto just looking at it. We don't have any of these, you know, pronoun issues, subject-verb agreement issues that are so fundamental. But we do have this very fundamental meaning issue. Requires someone to be tutored. Who's getting tutored in A? Yeah, who's tutored in B? Yeah, teachers again. So we can get rid of A and B. Now C, D, and E, as far as I know, teachers tutor students, students be tutored, that's okay, and students to be tutored. So we get the right thing in C, D, and E, but not in A or B. Okay, so where's something to grab onto in C, D, or E? We didn't have a lot of love for D, and we had a fair amount for both C and E. So where's something we can grab onto here? Shem is saying to. Oh, you mean like we need to. Yeah, you have to say I am required to do something. So that would get rid of D, right? We can get rid of D because it's got no to. But we would still have C and E. How about this? Does anyone see a modifier issue in E? I'll just give it away. The answer is C, which was our favorite in the room. Does anyone see a modifier issue in E? What is it? Yeah, this in core academic subjects. Now this is subtle. This is subtle, and it's why it's really worth looking at. This right here, it kind of looks fine, and yet there are multiple readings of this, in my opinion, from a meaning perspective. Namely, it could be that the students need to be tutored by their teachers, and the subjects in which they need to be tutored are the core academic subjects, which would make sense, right? And that's what C definitely says, because in core academic subjects can't modify students. What is in core academic subjects modifying in C? It's modifying tutoring, right? The tutoring, sorry, tutoring isn't there, you guys, in C. We always have to get the word right because the form of it very much matters. In answer choice C, it's modifying tutor, the verb tutor. The teachers have to tutor them in core academic subjects. In E, we want it to modify tutor, right? We want to modify to be tutored. But as someone already says, it could be modifying teachers, because that's also logical. It would be their teachers in core academic subjects. So for example, they need to be tutored by their math instructor, by their English instructor. The core academic subject teachers have to tutor them in something, right? So if we moved it, let's see, requires students who are underachieving to be tutored in core academic subjects by their teachers. JC, I would argue that it's grammatically correct. The use of the passive to be tutored instead of to tutor is stylistically really weird, So it still wouldn't be like, you know, better than C. But yeah, I think grammatically it would pass muster. It would still mean the correct thing. Yeah, so it would become something like a concision or a style issue. Absolutely. So notice this example in core academic subjects right here. It's a lot like, we talked about this earlier, sorry to just bounce around. It's a lot like what we saw here with by a physician, right? Where we want it to modify like can be read by a physician, but when you put it next to chart, suddenly it looks like can read the chart by a physician, not can be read by a physician. So that's kind of the issue there. The answer is C, as a lot of people saw. So good work on that one. Let's see, do I want to do this one? This one? Let's do this one. This is a little bit more straightforward, but I want to talk about it. All right, everyone, that's time. Pull in. Hopefully this one is fairly straightforward. I wanted to be friendlier. We've done some hard ones. So pull on in. So once again, the whole thing is underlined, but we do have a reasonably decent split at the beginning that will give us a sign. Can anyone tell me a problem in A? The whole thing is underlined, so we know there's going to be a modifier issue. What is the problem? Possessives. Yeah, more or less. Satish, that's actually true. More specifically, more specific. So with A, how do we have a problem? Yeah, famed for his masterful use of irony, right? We should get G. We should get G after that, right? So we have this modifier issue. He needs to come after that comma, right? Any modifier issues in B? Due to is incorrect. Have become classes due to the author? I'm not sure, Abby. I don't love it stylistically, but it's not really a grammatical error. Yeah, have become classics due to the. I don't see a problem with due to. There's another problem. It would be the author's slow revealing of, etc. So again, yeah, the issue in B is actually a pronoun issue, not a modifier issue. I just want to sort of focus us in on modifiers first, always. In this case, we have the he, and this is the possessive issue that was already discussed. This he does not match up with short stories, which is our subject. So that's wrong. She has famed for using irony in a masterful way. This still should technically be Guy de Maupassant, or sorry, Guy de Maupassant, which is a broken modifier. And then finally, in E, we have the same issue we've seen before. So you guys were really on top of these. Oops, want to make that blue. So we have a pronoun issue or a modifier issue in all four of the wrong answers. Okay, too easy. I get it. Let's try this one. Sorry if the font size was weird. Real quick, there were a couple of previous questions. In D, evidenced is being modified, someone said. Oops. In D, evidenced is being modified. Evidenced is a modifier. It's modifying irony, right? So a masterful use of irony, and that irony is evidenced. This is a past participle in the slow revelation of a tragic twist. So there is a modifier, but there's no problem there. And also really, really quickly, just because this came up on this question, somebody said they didn't want to use to because requires takes the subjunctive. The rule to remember about subjunctive usages, and again, if you don't know what we're talking about, don't even worry about it because I don't have time to do the whole detail on it. But you don't use subjunctives with bossy verbs unless you use the word that. So require can be, require can take the subjunctive or not. So in other words, I can say it is required that you, that he turn off the faucet every day. Or you can say he is required to turn off the faucet every day. In the first example, this is a subjunctive construction, where turn is in the subjunctive. In this version, it is just a non-subjunctive construction. So hopefully that answers your question. Sorry to super rush it. Okay, we're back here, and the underline is not there. Okay, cool. But again, you guys are actually really on top of this. It looks like I have exhausted my total stumper questions today, but that's okay. What categories are central to this question? It's really just one category twice, I think. And yes, Kira, that's it. Modifiers and parallelism. Yeah, I would argue it's mostly parallelism. Man, this is a parallelism question par excellence, right? What are our parallel markers? Or comparison, yeah, I would say parallel comparison, exactly. In contrast to and the comma, those are the parallel markers, right? And the reason why that's so important is, of course, if you know your rules, which it looks like you guys are totally on top of, once we have vertically integrated companies right here, that is our first parallel element. After the comma, we need to have the same one, and that's just going to kill A, B, and C right away, right? We need to have the horizontally integrated companies after the comma. And then we come down to D and E, and we have another parallelism. What's the parallelism in D and E? Yeah, actually not quite. Be careful. Yeah, it's control and increase, right? Are able to increase and control, as opposed to, in answer choice E, we have to increase and controlled. That is not parallel, right? Whereas to increase and control is. Don't forget that when you're don't forget that when you're paralleling infinitives, you don't have to repeat the to. So it is entirely correct here to say to increase and then just control. You could also say to control. That wouldn't be wrong, but you are very welcome to do it that way, whereas this is wrong. Rejewel, that is absolutely right. In contrast to V, comma, H. You've got to have it that way. So that's why you come down to D and E, and then this other parallelism gets you to D. So you know what? I think I'm going to leave it there just to open up the floor to kind of questions. I can wrap up. I had one more question, but I don't think it's too hard. The wrap up here, what I just want to drive home to all of you is when you don't see a visual split. Now, you might get other issues. We've seen some parallelism today. We've seen a lot of things. But I want you to think modifiers, okay? And I want you to think modifiers in terms of two things. First, the grammatical issues that surround whatever they are, relative pronouns, participles, prepositional phrases, etc. And if you don't know all the rules surrounding those terms, you need to learn them. But I also want you to think in terms of meaning issues, right? Think about how the movement and usage of modifiers is affecting the meaning. And I want you to go here. Go here before you go to tiny stylistic issues of word choice, right? That's what I want you to avoid, because I find that students, when they're faced with a really long sentence, they have a tendency to just go to like, oh God, one of them says agreed with, and one of them just says agreed to. One of those has to be wrong. And maybe one of them doesn't, and they're both fine, right? So don't necessarily worry about something that you're not sure about as an idiom until you've thought about modifiers and meaning as a grammatical issue. Also, don't forget, good signs for modifiers are long sentences or long underlined portions. And the reason why is the way you mess with modifiers, you move them around in the sentence, right? So that's what we saw when we looked at sort of the first store or first I went to the store. But of course, GMAT can't move modifiers around unless they underline the whole sentence. And of course, that will also cause all the answer choices to look very different. That is, I think, most of what I have to say today, but I'm going to open up the floor to some questions. Relevant to this stuff is best, but if you just have questions about more general stuff, I can stick around for a little bit answering them, but obviously I'm not going to answer too general or too specific of questions. But yeah, I'm calling it there for at least the moment. I will stop the recording.